Hey friends, today we're talking about Rocket Lab. They report earnings on August 11th, 2022. I'm going to cover the stock. I'm going to share my position, which is right here shown. And I'm going to talk about my expectations for earnings and how I'm thinking about this as a position in my portfolio. I have a position that is currently $8,750 in Rocket Lab. I'm up $806. I have put $7,940 into the stock over the last month. It's actually up $1,900, showing up 28%. Over the last week, it's up 15%, and yesterday it was down a little bit. So some pretty strong performance for the stock in my portfolio. You can see that year to date, the stock is still down 55%. So it's been a tough go for this stock over the last year as a publicly traded stock. It came public as a SPAC, and we all know what's happened over the last couple of years. But I like the stock to own now for the long term. It is very high risk, but I also think it potentially is high reward, which is why I own the stock. The current price is $5.44. It's got a market cap of $2.5 billion and a price to sales ratio of 29, but they're expected to have very strong revenue growth. I mean, if they succeed, they are just getting started. So for this stock, right now I'm basically ignoring the price to sales ratio, minus what it looked like, back when the stock was around 20. I mean, it was pretty high at that point, obviously. Just some quick background on the stock. It was founded in 2006. It's an end-to-end space company with an established track record of mission success. They deliver reliable launch services, spacecraft components, satellites, and other spacecraft and on-orbit management solutions that make it faster, easier, and more affordable to access space. And they have the Electron small orbital launch vehicle, which is what they have launched previously. And they are developing the Neutron, which we've got some updates about that we're going to talk about in this video. Okay, so let's jump into just what the previous earnings have been and what the expectations are for this quarter, which they report on tomorrow, actually, after the market close, August 11th. So their last quarter, they had normalized or adjusted EPS of -1 cent, which beat by 3 cents. And then actual EPS was -6 cents, which was a miss. They had $40 million in revenue, or $40.7 million in revenue, which beat by $856,000. And they're expecting -4 cents adjusted EPS, -6 cents GAAP EPS, and then revenue of $49 million. They've had 3 EPS revisions down in the last 90 days. So expectations for this company, and this is what I talked about, right, is there's a potential for a lot of revenue growth, which is sort of modeled out in these expectations. So the EPS estimates here over the next few years, these are going to be wildly inaccurate, but they're a starting point. -16 cents in 2022, all the way to 56 cents positive in 2026. So they are expected to become positive on an earnings per share basis over the next few years. And so that's very strong EPS growth, and it ends with a forward PE of under 10 by 2026, which is pretty reasonable if they're successful and the company's growing EPS that fast. But we'll see what happens. Year-over-year growth, and this is for revenue, right? So in 2022, this year, they're expected to have $206 million. By 2027, which is where they've got 3 analysts with expectations in, they're expected to have $1.6 billion, which is 8 times more than what they have now. And so that would bring the price sales ratio, and this is why I'm not concerned with the high price sales ratio right now. That would bring it down, a forward price sales ratio of 1.5 in 2027. And if they continue to be successful and grow, then it gets below 1 in 2031. So obviously that's not going to be what the price sales ratio is if this company is successful, which means they're either going to miss those revenue estimates and disappoint, or hit them and the stock price will go up, because there's no way if they hit these things that the price sales ratio is going to be under 1 in 2031, or they're going to beat these expectations, and then that provides even more upside. So that's how I think about this stock, knowing there's a ton of risk involved, and I have to size my position appropriately for that risk. I have to be comfortable with it pretty much going to zero, because that's what could happen with this type of speculative company. Okay, a couple big announcements, right? And this is why I'm thinking about the stock now, as well as because earnings are coming up. They announced a date for their 2022 Investor Day, which is also going to provide an update to that Neutron rocket, a development update. So Investor Day is going to be on September 21st, 2022, which is in a month and 10 days. Peter Beck's going to talk, the chief financial advisor is going to talk, and then members of their leadership team are going to host a series of presentations followed by Q&A. The focus is going to be on progress they've made since it de-SPACed in August of 2021, current roadmap, development of the Neutron launch, and future growth opportunities. So if this goes well, there could be a lot of excitement around the stock running up to that event and then even afterwards. But I don't invest just based off that excitement, right? But I am looking forward to getting this update. Couple operational updates, right? They successfully launched the second of 2 back-to-back National Reconnaissance Office missions. I also talked about, and I've covered this in a previous Rocket Lab video, so just search the channel for Rocket Lab. The Capstone mission, which was successful. They are putting together a string of successful launches and really pushing the limits of exploration so far and technology so far with their Photon platform. And I really like to see that, and it makes me bullish on more contracts that are likely to come through, more interests that are likely to come through, and then the ability to actually serve this backlog that they have, over $500 million in backlog of people who have already prepaid some portion of future launches. A lot of things going in favor of this business right now. So this mission, it launched on the Electron rocket from Pad B at the Launch Complex 1, which I think is in New Zealand, on August 4th. It carried a payload designed, built, and operated by the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office, in partnership with the Australian Department of Defense. So there you go, government contracts. This mission follows a successful delivery to orbit of its Predator NROL 162 3 weeks earlier. So there you go, you've got 2 launches in a month. Pretty awesome. Launched on the WISE 1 Looks Ahead mission on July 13th, 2022. These national security missions, combined with the successful launch of the Capstone mission, like we talked about in June 28, make up a record launch cadence for the company of 3 successful launches in just over 5 weeks. Love it. We love to see that. As they can increase that cadence of launches, they can get more revenue and more profitability as a company over time. Just a quick look back at the first quarter 2022 at some of the backlog numbers. And here's what I was talking about with the backlog. The backlog grew from $241 million in Q4 21 to $546 million in Q1 22. And just a few weeks after, when they actually did their earnings report, it had actually grown another $5 million to $551 million the day of their earnings report. Okay, and so some things I'm watching just for earnings, and we're talking about financials a little bit. So again, we talked about revenue, $40.7 million in Q1 2022. That was 48% quarter-on-quarter revenue growth. So that's from one quarter to the next, from Q4 to Q1. In Q4 2021, they had GAAP gross margin of 24%. Non-GAAP gross margin of 36%, which took a major hit down to a GAAP gross margin of 9% and a non-GAAP gross margin of 24%. That essentially happened because a lot of their spend still took place, but a launch that was supposed to happen in Q1 got pushed to Q2, which hurt their gross margin because they're still spending, but they're not making as much revenue or booking as much revenue. So that talks about it. Launch services generated $6.6 million, $9.9 million lower than Q4 2021, and $7 million lower than the original Q1 2022 guidance. That was impacted by a customer launch delay due to satellite readiness and weather, which launched successfully in Q2 2022. So they should have caught up in this quarter, essentially. Here's the outlook for Q2 that the company provided, 51 to 54 million. We'll see where they come in for revenue. They were planning for 3 launches, and they anticipated launch services of approximately 19 million. They expected space systems revenue to be 32 and 35. So we'll see how those segments break down. Launch, 19 million. Space systems, 32 to 35 million. GAAP and non-GAAP gross margins, we talked about this. They expect the gross margins of 11 to 13%, impacted by a favorable product mix and improved utilization of overhead and indirect launch and production costs. Non-GAAP gross margins of 26 to 28%, so getting those numbers back up there. Operating expenses, they provided their guidance there, 39 to 41 million. Non-GAAP, 23 to 25 million. Okay, and finally, if you're interested in Rocket Lab, one of the best places to follow them is on Twitter, @Rocket Lab. They just share a bunch of cool updates. Because of the company size, it doesn't get a lot of coverage in the markets. This is one of the best ways to keep up with the company, and then obviously subscribing to this channel and hitting the notification bell so you never miss an update.